Imagine that there is someone or a group of people around you that almost unknowingly are affecting your health. Do you think that's possible? Let's see. Today, we're looking at how your environment impacts your health, and we're assessing the collective energy of the people around you. Health explorer Neil Fellows here to get healthy and fit and stay healthy and fit and do it in a way that's unique and natural to you. Please subscribe and hit the bell. If you're not as happy as you want to be, more stressed than you want to be, not in the kind of good health that you want to be in, then the chances are there's something that's stopping you, and it could be something in your environment, and it could be the people around you. Tim Walter is a house healer and alternative life coach, and today we're talking with Tim about how your environment impacts your health, and we're assessing the collective energy of the people around you. So Tim, what are some of the ways that our environment can impact our health? Let's talk about the positives and the negatives.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can take it right from the really basic physical stuff of where is your house, for example. You know, if you're looking at where we live, completely irrespective of what is the house actually like, but where is it? Is it in a rural location? Is it in an urban location? Is it, if it's rural, is it the top of a hill? Is it at the bottom of the hill? You know, obviously, if you're on the top of the hill, you've got the obvious physical things. If you're more likely to get strong winds up there, you're going to have terrific views, of course, somewhere like I live in the Yorkshire Dales. But good God, you know, I wouldn't want to be living on the top of some of these hills. Living down the bottom of them is subject to potentials of floods. So swings and roundabouts, but that's the very, very physical aspect. If you think about the rural versus the urban, then obviously the issues in living in an urban environment are very different, because you've got the impact of other people living potentially very close to you. If you're living in flats, you've got them even closer, you're above and below. So these are very strong physical, everyday influences that everybody can experience. There's also things like, particularly in urban environments, where you've got potential contaminated land, historically contaminated land. You know, that is a big issue. And of course, you hope that new houses are not built on that land. But of course, pressures of land and building, they sometimes are. And usually what happens in those circumstances is that, you know, the developers spend a fortune on taking away topsoil and bringing in new topsoil. But, you know, sometimes what happens is that actually the homeowners that then move into these lovely new homes, they can't actually grow vegetables and stuff, even in the new topsoil, because there's a danger that it goes through into contaminated land beneath. So that is not a great environment to be living in, even in that respect. But again, a very everyday example that everybody would be able to experience. There are a huge amount of the population that are very easily classifiable as highly sensitive people. And for those people, there are even more influences that are more subtle, that can really adversely affect their lives or positively affect their lives. These are, you know, sometimes the highly sensitive people don't even realize that they are highly sensitive, and they wonder what the heck's going on. Why I moved into this house, there would seem to be nothing wrong with it when I looked around it, but now I feel like absolute, you know, X, Y, Z. So they can be affected by things like electromagnetic fields. You know, some people are very sensitive to that. We've talked before, I think, about the sort of poisons that you can have in your house from cleaning fluids and liquids and sprays and that sort of thing. But there are also influences from the land itself. Again, going back to think about the contaminated land, but a space can be contaminated by the history of what's happened on that land. And you think about somewhere like, for example, Glencoe in Scotland. Now, obviously, there's not a lot of development work up there, but if you've ever visited Glencoe, it was the site in the 1600s of a clan massacre. About 30 men were absolutely slaughtered up there, really brutally, apparently. And you go there today, and if you've got any kind of sensitivity to your environment whatsoever, then the whole Glencoe area feels incredibly heavy and incredibly sad, even if you're not aware of the history. So space and place can hold the energy and the memories of past activity. And you walk into a new build, you actually have no idea what happened on that land in the past. So there are loads of things that, you know, detrimentally can affect people. And I tend to talk more about the detrimental stuff because that's what I'm involved in my work. My work goes diving in and looks for the detrimental aspects, not the positive stuff necessarily. But equally, there's always far, far more positive aspects that will influence people living in a space than there are negative. It's just that obviously the negative things are the things that we get our attention drawn to because we wonder why we feel so dreadful. But yeah.
So how can we encourage more of the positive and less of the negative then?
I'm going to be a bit woolly, I'm afraid, because one of the things that I've realised and learned through experience of all these years of doing this work as a house healer is that actually everybody is affected differently by the positive and the negative. One really big obvious positive is actually to connect to living things. I mean, this is, it's so basic, but it is so true that connecting to house plants, or if you're lucky enough to have a decent sized garden, to get out there and really connect to the land, to the soil and the things that are growing in that space, in that land, that is such a good heart enlivening experience. I mean, of course, you might say, well, children are like that. There's nothing to beat children or grandchildren. But of course, plants don't answer back, and that's the big advantage of plants. You can really, you don't have to have those difficult conversations. You can have conversations with plants, but they're not the difficult ones. But it's really more about just being aware, and we've talked about this before and touched on this before, but just being aware of how you feel, recognizing how you feel, and noticing what is it, where are you in the house when you feel good, where are you in the house when you feel a bit off, and then addressing, so on all of the layers, right from the physical layer, do I actually like the decoration in this room, down to, well, what do I actually feel? What do I feel? Do I always feel a bit sick when I come in here? Is that what the trouble is? All of these things. Do the kids always argue in this space? Why is it the kids why do I have to keep sending the kids to the rooms when they go into the living room or whatever it is? These are things that can, the environment can subtly affect the way that all of us behave in a space. And typically, difficult children, I mean, I'm not saying it's only due to the environment, but typically, if we do a healing on a house, we do energy work on a house, and to affect one thing, quite often as a result, as a sort of a byproduct, if you like, what is noticed by parents is that actually the children's behaviour calms down and there's more harmony in the space. And that's really what we're asking for. That's what we're looking for when we do the healing, is more harmony and balance.
So you've talked about the way we behave in space. We also talked about the spaces themselves, the urban over the more rural. We've got people around us kind of all the time. It might be, we've got people living in the same house as we have, or there might be neighbours, and obviously those neighbours can be more condensed if we're living in more of those urban areas. And each person brings their own kind of unique energy to the world, don't they? And what I'm interested to explore with you is the impact that a person or a group of people, such as a family or maybe a business organisation or a neighbourhood, just wondering what are your thoughts on the energy that those people can bring?
Yeah, I suppose what you're really talking about is the interaction between those people, perhaps more than their effect on a wider environment. And especially these days of the pandemic and lockdown and all the rest of it, a lot of us have been going through a lot of very, very trying times, and of course it can go to extremes. I think again, I was saying about how children can be affected in a positive way by a house healing, and as you say, everybody brings their own unique energy into a space, because from my point of view, I describe it as everybody is actually living in their own world, and when people come together, they're actually exchanging the information of their world. But that's getting a little bit philosophical and heavy. But often what we find, actually, if we've got, I mean, I've done several house healing jobs for clients where they have commented on, almost as an aside, that their neighbours, they really don't get on with their neighbours. And it's like quite often it's like I don't know what it is, but we just don't get on with them. It's just like or they're noisy or something like this. And that usually is the prime reason for coming to have the house healed in the first place. But it's there as an issue, as one of the facets of the picture. And in the same way as we find that more harmony is brought to a family, actually what tends to happen is that more harmony is brought to that neighbor-client picture. It is not unusual to find that actually after we've done a healing that the neighbors move, that they actually leave. And it's once would be coincidence. I've had it happen 3 times over the years. So to me, that's not coincidence. It's like, well, that's a possible side effect of the healing that we do to bring more harmony into the client's world. A lot, we know, I'm very conscious that a lot of what I talk about might sound very, very woo-woo to a lot of your viewers, people who watch this. But, all I'm talking about is looking at the subtle end of the spectrum and really paying attention to what's going on between people and how they exist and what inputs they are receiving and they are putting out. So you look at the dynamic of a family, and there's all sorts of exchanges of emotion and information, and a lot of that is based on historical, what's happened in the past, and assumptions. A family does not live mindfully. It lives on habit and perfunctory knee-jerk reaction, and that is not actually necessarily the most healthy way to operate and to function in a family unit. And when you look at, if you've got a sensitive person in that family, one of them, let's say 1 out of 4, then they're going to be picking up on all sorts of information and often processing it without realizing that that's what they're doing. And that could be information from their siblings or from their parents or from the environment. But if you have one person in a family unit that is not in harmony with the rest of the family unit because they're confused by what they're being inundated with, then that creates a problem in itself, because the family dynamic, the parents get concerned. Why is daughter behaving like this? Daughter doesn't know why she's behaving like this, and I'm not talking even about sort of adolescent teenagers growing up, which have their own individual issues. But with somebody that is incredibly sensitive and is being subjected to influence both from other people and the environment, then it can be a really difficult knot to untie and sort out. The house healing work will help ease that, because it does help bring balance, but it's not necessarily the be all and end all. It will assist things. And sometimes what we have found is that we'll do a healing. The family might say, well, okay, that was nice. It feels a little bit different, but little Sally is still behaving the same. In which case we'd say, well, go take her along to a psychotherapist, or to do the standard route. But they may not have done that if they'd not had the healer in the first place and had that conversation and opened up the awareness of, well, maybe there's something affecting her that's not affecting the rest of you. So yeah.
I guess part of this is looking at how you remove individual pressures around you. Because as a parent, you've got, let's say, 2 or 3 kids in the house, and those kids bring their behaviors, they bring their stresses, and they change as the children grow. And then you've got maybe neighbors, and maybe you do or don't get on with the neighbors, and then you've got your work issues. There's the people that you work in and around, and the things that they bring to your world. And I suppose really it's like, if you look at this one thing at a time and go, okay, how do I, if you're someone who feels stressed, how do I relieve the stress around me one thing at a time? And I know, like for me as a parent, when I was my kids were younger, as a parent, I used to just like take on that responsibility of whatever happened. I would say, right, what did I do that would cause that to happen, and what can I change in the environment around me so that never happens again? Because you could spend all the time you have just lecturing your children or telling them off or whatever, but it may make no difference whatsoever. But as a parent, if you change your behavior, you can change the whole dynamic. And that piece of stress then removes, and your children then have a different experience, because now they're not maybe growing up with a parent who's telling them off all the time or lecturing them. Now they've actually got room to enjoy life in a different way, because as a parent you did something different. I suppose that can be a change to a room layout, or the stress and tension in a room, as you say, like from a feng shui point of view, or it could actually be just in terms of your own personal behavior and how you show up as a parent.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Go on.
I was just going to ask you, do you actually have like a story from the work that you've done of where you've been able to sort of help sort of relieve the pressure on a family in that kind of way?
Well, there was actually the most recent job that I've done was for a lady in Australia, down in Melbourne. And she came to me because she didn't feel settled in her house. There was her husband, and her daughter. Daughter was having a tough time at school, fitting in, making friends. Neither the mother or the daughter was sleeping very well. And she wanted to, she was interested in the sort of effects that maybe the house was having on them. And for her, and I'm citing her partly because it's the most recent job that I've done. It's always nice to be sort of right up and current. You're only as good as the last job you've done. So we did a standard healing, and in fact, not even as in depth as we could have done. We went for a lesser option. But her response a couple of weeks later was, in fact, I've got it here. Since you worked on our home, both my daughter and I have been sleeping much better. In the 4 years that we've been in the house, we've not had such good sleep. My daughter is also much happier at school. If you do that, I'll be in touch. But, that's terrific. And that's exactly what we want. That was work that was done with the intention of helping the sleep and helping the child improve her situation at school. Now, so you say, well, how does that work? Well, I don't know how. I actually honestly don't know how it works. And that's part of the fascination for me, and why I continue to do the house healing, and why it's so fascinating that every job is so different. But we connect in the healing work. It's almost like faith healing, because we connect to the subtle energies of influence, which I term the management. It's the influences of creation. If I was a religious person, then I would be I'd be using the G word. I'd be saying it was God. But we connect to that, and we do all of the work that we do is in a divine alignment. And so we never really know what's going to happen, what's going to occur for the client, but we know that the process will be the appropriate process, whether that brings some period of chaos and disruption before a noticeable improvement is variable. We don't know whether that occurs or not.
Yeah.
As you were talking about the family unit, and one of the aspects of this is that we don't know. It may have been that the mother in this instance may actually have been encouraged by making contact with somebody outside of the family that appeared to be able to offer some help, and therefore on a subconscious level, her attitude and the way that she was, she may be less stressed knowing that somebody was helping her in some form. And therefore that might have reflected through to her sleep. It might have reflected through to her daughter's sleep. But I can't, would that then have influenced the daughter at school, her ability to make friends, etc.? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. If the daughter was feeling, oh, okay, mum's okay, so I'm going to be relaxed, and therefore that reflects in the way that she interacts with her friends.
It's interesting. The interview I was just doing with Sarah Taylor, 21 times world champion female bodybuilder, and we were talking about 1% changes that can actually shift life. Now, little shift, subtle thing that you're talking about that has made a difference. Now someone can sleep better. If we're sleeping better, the brain is working more. It's got more capacity during the day. We don't feel stressed. We're making decisions from a better place. So the environment around us then can shift, and being open to then talking to someone and asking for some help. Whereas, when you were feeling stressed and under the cosh before, you couldn't do that. Now you can.
Exactly.
Now it just changes just from one subtle thing. I'm always fascinated by this.
Yeah, the phrase that I use is that usually the changes, because there usually are many, they are subtle but significant. And it's exactly what you're saying, is that those just gentle nuances that shift can make a big difference. They are significant.
Mm.
And nothing changes. I did an interview earlier on in the week for an American channel, and they were talking about the big change in the world, and we're in this current extinction event, and what do we do about it? And I said, well, you cannot do something and kind of go outside and switch off the extinction event. You don't interact with the extinction event. What you do is you take your own little bit of action yourself, decide what that is, and you work from your heart, and you know that this is really truly what you can do. You just take your own little step, and 7.5, 8 billion people doing that makes a difference. It affects the extinction effect, but we don't go out and go, I don't like that. So it's one step at a time.
Talking about little effects and things that we can do, from the information we've talked about today, I'd love to make it practical. Is there one thing that you can leave us with as a challenge that we can try and take forward into our lives?
Well, there are different levels, aren't there? I think if somebody is feeling, okay, let me look at it another way. We've talked about the subtle influences from our environment, and that's the thing that really gets me going. That's the thing that I really find exciting. And a lot of people know about smudging, so using a bit of sage in a room and smudging it. It's all very new age and a bit wacky, some people think, but a lot of people do it. I think you'd be surprised how many people do it. It's sort of like a basic understanding of some simple feng shui, really. And there's also, you can use sound as well to do a similar thing. So it's actually doing something with the intention of lightening the space, of clearing the space, of changing the energy, if you want to use that word, of the room or the house. And so I would actually say, try that, just try that and see how the room feels afterwards. Because quite often what happens is that actually the room becomes a little bit more zingy, a little bit lighter, a little bit bigger, in the same way as it does when you've redecorated. You redecorated the room, put all the furniture back in, and it's just a little bit more zingy than it was before you did the job. And this process of smudging or using a singing bowl or chiming, just to get a simple glass that it makes a nice resonant sound, and just run it like that, just run it down the corners, and but do it with the intention, and that's the crucial thing. You do it with the intention of shifting and making a change, and that is the most subtle you can get, almost. But intention is a massive part of this sort of energy clearing work, and I think it's really fun. I like to get people to use dowsing on the YouTube channel that I have. I want them to get in there and do practical things, and that's the most practical thing they can do in the sort of related to the work that I do. But this intentional clearing with sound or with incense or that sort of thing, or sage, is the next layer, as it were, really getting in there and using your intention to change things subtly, because it really, really works.
Nice, Tim. Thank you. It's always fascinating talking to you, Tim. Really do appreciate your time sharing this information with us today. The thing I'm taking away from the conversation with Tim just now is how life evolves, how we change one thing and then suddenly another thing changes and another thing changes, and life can just get better from that place. Tim's story was really fascinating, how he'd helped them just to get more sleep and suddenly their whole life was changing. And that's why we do what we do here at Total Wellness Club. I love hearing stories like that wellness professionals like Tim have been able to help people make a change that started to transform their whole life. I mean, you just take that child who was struggling to sleep and you move that person's life on now because of the changes that are happening. It's going to be a different life as a result of that. And I do get excited by that. Will you take Tim's challenge? It could be life-changing for you if you do. As we're saying, we make a small change, and from those small changes, it can have a ripple effect right the way through your life. I'll be taking the challenge and I'll be reporting it in my monthly roundup. You can see my findings from this challenge in our challenge roundup video, which is a monthly summary covering all the challenges our experts shared. To get that video and all our latest health and wellness uploads, including interviews and reviews, subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified whenever we post. And if this channel can help your friends and family, please share it with them too. Also, if you want to get proactive with your health, Total Wellness Club are developing health quests over at questly.life. Join while we're developing the site and get access to health quests that immediately personalise your health. You'll get to identify which of 10 critical health categories need your attention. You'll be able to track your progress and you'll be able to help us develop the platform. I'll put a link in the description below and I'll see you in the next video.